Will every e-beer need AI skills within 12 months?
Oh, absolutely. I think not just the EB, every worker around the world needs to start thinking about how to build these AI skills because it is going to touch their work life pretty quickly if it hasn't already. Had you asked me this question like even 6 months ago, the answer would be different. But at the moment, I do see some really interesting AI work being done inside the four walls of an organization today.
What I really love about AI now is there's this thing about that multiplier effect, like being able to do so much more quickly.
AI won't replace employer branding, but it certainly will redefine it. I've got Amit Parmar, CEO of Cliquify, back in the guest seat, and we're talking about how AI is evolving employer branding. We'll be looking at where organizations are on the maturity scale of AI adoption, and we'll be talking about how AI's biggest opportunity isn't just in content creation, but data analytics, and how AI can really help organizations go from data to strategy quicker than ever. And hold on till the end, because we're going to be going through an AI checklist to help you select the right AI for your tech stack. And there's access to a free Cleo report from Cliquify that's going to help you understand your organization, the context of the market, and what you can do next. So let's dive into the chat.
Welcome back. We're on for episode 2 of this mini series. Really enjoyed the first chat. Anyone who hasn't listened to that, make sure you popped somewhere near this video or in the episode description and catch out the first episode where we're really focusing on the challenges that TAs and employer branders are facing, with a few nuggets around data and trends that Amit has seen, throughout, that you naturally would do as running an organization like Cliquify. So let's start off like we did in the first episode. Let's start off with some quick fire questions. Yes, no, and maybe answers. And this time, of course, we're talking about AI. So first one, let's go. Will AI ever replace employer brand strategists?
No.
And AI writes EVP content that feels truly unique and authentic?
Maybe.
Thanks. Do most EB teams know where they sit on their AI maturity curve or scale?
No.
Is AI most powerful in content creation or in measurement and insights?
Measurement and insights.
Nice. Final one. This can be a little bit longer. You've got a whole sentence for this one. Will every EBer need AI skills within 12 months?
Oh, absolutely. I think not just the EB, every worker around the world needs to start thinking about how to build these AI skills because it is going to touch their work life pretty quickly if it hasn't already.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I'm sure we'll touch on that. That's a juicy one. That is definitely. But based on all the conversations you've been having, and naturally those conversations are going to be a lot. There's going to be a lot more talk about AI. From the people on their AI journey, from like the cautious to the early adopters, where do you see most people sitting in that scale or spectrum?
Yeah, Chris, AI is moving so quickly. Had you asked me this question like even 6 months ago, the answer would be different. But at the moment, I do see some really interesting AI work being done inside the four walls of an organization today, from writing content to getting assistance with some analytics, which we'll talk about momentarily. I do think if I were to peg the usage today or the maturity today, I would say early adopters to maybe some organizations getting really ahead of the curve from an AI standpoint. So
when it comes to the challenges you see teams having with AI, when it comes to consideration and adoption, what are those challenges?
yeah. So I think, and from what I'm seeing, is that there are a lot of challenges around understanding what the organization has sanctioned for use versus not. Right.
Yeah, it's a good one.
So that's the first step, especially if you're working for a large multinational company. you do have, am I supposed to be using this? Am I using this in the right way? So that there's a lot of that, a little bit of anxiety, if you will, associated with that. Am I going to get in trouble if I tried this? Right. It really depends on the culture of the organization, but we're all trained to be working in the confines of the policies of the organization. And so I do see that happening, but in the context of that, you do see, Chris, so really interesting work happening, not just with content generation, but really where the opportunity lies is how do you make sense of all this data, disparate systems that exist today? How do you use AI to tell a story from a data analytics standpoint? And I think that opportunity is largely untapped today. And it's part of the maturity curve, right? So right now, as you said, a lot of folks are using AI for content generation or getting a script just to get the ideas known as a co-pilot. But as the AI matures and the organization matures in terms of AI adoption, I do see analytics is the next frontier, if you will, Chris, using AI. And there's so much opportunity with that we'll talk about momentarily here.
Yeah, it's like I do see it as there's an apprehension where teams are maybe waiting for what the other parts of the organization are going to do and going, I'm not sure I can do this. So they're waiting, just holding off until things are being figured out. And if you take the usual, procurement process of implementing anything, maybe it's got a bit quicker, but it's still quite slow moving ship sometimes. So, which is too slow to keep up with the speed of change. So that's a really difficult thing to address. I totally get the challenges that people in house have. There's also that other thing where people are going rogue and using their own tech because they can get access to it quickly.
Yes.
And that is good because they can experiment, but then also if that's within the corporation, then there are naturally things you've got to do. So as always, the best answer sits in the gray area, doesn't it? In the middle is that balancing act. I suppose actually, that's a kind of naturally giving myself a segue to our next question really is, let's imagine we're going, EB teams treated content like software, treated their function like software. They're running experiments, testing, iterating, and seeing where would AI make the fastest difference and how does Cleo help do that? And maybe we start off talking a little bit about by Cleo and then seeing how Cleo can help that situation.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Cliquify just celebrated our 5-year anniversary, and that was 2 weeks ago now. Super excited.
Congrats.
Yeah, thanks to our teams that are just relentless at driving innovation in the space. And of course, our clients who have a lot of their fingerprints on the product itself. I will say, over the last 5 years, what have we seen? Because that'll kind of position Cleo and the why behind why we created Cleo Intelligence. We were seeing a lot of great content. All right. We have 20,000 plus stories that have been told inside the platform in different formats. Right. So videos, photos, text format, multi-channels. And what we did is we actually used AI. So how Cleo was born was internally, we had this question of, okay, we have these 20,000 stories. What can we glean from all of these stories in terms of engagement inside of that story, the content that resides in each of those stories? And so we started building Cleo to analyze all of that. And then we realized, why are we just focused on internal stories? Right? Why not combine this with competitive intelligence as it relates to who that particular client is losing talent to? What is the sentiment of working there? So not just Glassdoor or Reddit or any of these channels, but also engagement survey data that Cleo can ingest. So really having a robust engine to then generate something that's truly unique to you as an organization. So that's where the danger of AI, Chris, as you alluded to earlier, is we're all going to sound alike, right? Because AI models are open in nature. And what will happen is over time, you're going to really not be able to differentiate as an organization. Where Cleo comes in, which is also AI, but we're using it in a very unique way, is not for like content generation for the sake of content generation, but really getting to the bottom of what makes your organization truly unique based on all of these data points. And then generating content or suggestions, at least, to say, hey, we've analyzed, I'm just going to make up an organization. We've analyzed company X to company Y. And here are all the indicators of what's happening in terms of sentiment, in terms of talent inflow and outflow. And then based on all of those data points, here is a true differentiated content strategy for you to consider. And it's not just content strategy, it's actual content that Cleo can deliver within hours. We're really compressing the work that it takes for an employer branding leader to do today, be it with an agency or even solo, from literally months to hours. And we're seeing this across the board. Chris, we just launched Cleo 3 months ago, and we have 148 companies already using it.
That's really good. Nice. There's a need for it, isn't there? I remember, so I was at RecFest, in the UK. The US one is happening soon, isn't it? But I was at a talk about AI and employer branding, and I asked a question to the panel, and basically it was David Phillips from CGI. He said, I'm a one-man band. When AI comes along, it really, really helps. So I talked to him afterwards about it being, so it's kind of like a sidekick for you, isn't it? I said, yeah, it just really multiply my capabilities. So I think that is great because, typically this space is connected to solo, part-time, or small teams. So I like to think that if you could point at the entrepreneurs within an organization, be quite a little bit scrappy and agile, it's employer branders. So I love the fact that AI can play that sidekick and multiplier, side of things. When it comes to and congrats on that. It's great you've had that adoption rate on.
Thank you.
Take us through the sequence for kind of how something would usually start. What are the key functions of Cleo? You've touched on some already, but let's kind of go sequentially through it and see what Cleo does.
Oh, absolutely, Chris. The first view or the first kind of data set that Cleo captures is, okay, who are the talent competitors? And of course, the initial view is global in nature, and then we have country level cuts as well. So within a particular country, your competitor set, your talent competitors might be vastly different than another country, right? So that's the first step of Cleo, is really understanding who are you losing most of your talent to and where you're gaining talent from, right? Because it's inflow, outflow data of talent. And we have a proprietary way of capturing that, of course, across the sphere. So that's the first step of Cleo, right? We all call this like inputs into the model, right? So that's input number one is your competitive intel. Input number two is sentiment. How do people feel about working at that organization? And not just Glassdoor, right? We want to have a more normalized view of the true sentiment of working in that organization. So what we do is we combine sentiment that is externally facing, meaning people are talking about you on LinkedIn or on Glassdoor or Reddit and so on. But then we're also combining that with engagement survey data that you can feed right into Cleo as well. So we're combining your internal sentiment with external, and then the AI model is basically normalizing both of those data sets to actually give you like a real picture or the truest picture of the sentiment of working in that organization. And again, that's global as well as at the country level at the moment.
Okay.
Right? Input number one is competitive intel. Input number two is your sentiment. And we combine both of those, and then we take it at each of the competitors. So we will actually take the sentiment at company X and then company Y, and then combine that data. And then we take all of that, and it's millions of data points. It's probably billions to this point at this stage. And then we've trained our model, and it's a proprietary model to Cliquify, Cleo. And the model will say, hey, company X, this is like your EVP playbook. This is your content that's suggested in that given month. So it's very dynamic, right? Because we're constantly listening. So this gets refreshed every month. And then here's your content planner, even all in one click. There isn't a whole lot of thinking, to be honest, that needs to be done. And then the idea there is, because we don't want AI just replacing the entire workflow, we want the AI to be a companion. And so the AI companion, which is Cleo AI, is just suggesting, right? It's not saying, hey, Chris, you need to do XYZ. Based on all this data, consider XYZ as your content strategy. And then, of course, Cliquify helps you build the content at the back end of that analysis.
And it's natural that you've built out Cleo in that way, of course, because that's such a nice tee up to then the actual activation and deployment of content. And I think when you talk through that, I think about, goodness me, my career and the amount of time that it takes to do these kind of things. And I think it's what I really love about AI now is this thing about that multiplier effect, like being able to do so much more quickly. And I think it very much does. AI democratizes employer branding. The barrier to entry, I think, is a lot lower. It's great because actually, if you're not doing anything at all, then platforms like Cleo have a role to play. But even if you want to take it to the next level, you've still got a foundation to work off and going, oh, actually, because I just know playing out kind of scenarios that I have with my clients, it's, we've seen that this is great. Now, this could be a talking heads interview. It could just be a blog post article. But imagine if it was a documentary. Imagine if it's a podcast. Imagine actually there's an event that we do. It's, yes, I really like that.
Yeah, it's a great jumping off point. Or even if you don't have the capacity for it to be a jumping off point, you can actually say, okay, this is my content strategy. Here's the content we're going to develop based on all this data. By the way, huge amount of credibility when you go to your talent leader or the chief people officer. And we talked about ROI, really protecting your job, if you will. When you go in with that kind of a dialogue, guaranteed, and we're seeing this with our clients, it's the strategic conversation gets elevated pretty quickly.
Yeah, nice. Well, I really like that. Yeah, I think and the more this kind of stuff happens, more people take these approaches, the more employer branding is going to elevate as a strategic business asset to an organization. We're going to do a bit of an AI checklist. So we might touch on some of these already, but if you could give EB leaders like 3 to 5 questions that they must answer before adding AI to their stack, what would they be and why do they matter?
Oh, what a great question, Chris. In fact, we might even produce something that your audience can just leverage. We'll probably put it in a block fashion, if you will. If I was to say, okay, let's focus on 3 questions, right? I think the first one is really around governance, right? And look, I'm all for experimentation. I'm all for that, but just making sure that, what you're doing, what you're working on is at least aligned with your organization's stance on AI. I love the experimentation. I don't want to diminish that in any way, but just be mindful. So the question would be, hey, am I sharing any sensitive information with this AI model that's going to put my company at risk? Right. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, if I'm looking at this AI, just understand, is it going to differentiate you or not? Or your organization or not, right? Because you may be feeding into an open model that now over time, everything is going to just become, I guess there's a term somebody used earlier, employer branding, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just be mindful of that. Like, who are you feeding information into? So that's a question to ask. Where is my data going? The third question is really, okay, hey, I've been experimenting with this. I just spent 3 hours experimenting with this AI model. But really ask that ROI question and say, okay, were these 3 hours well spent, or could I have spent those 3 hours in a more ROI friendly way? But those would be the 3 that I would hone in on.
Nice. I think that's great, because actually when so many more solutions available to you because of AI, it is about choosing the right solution. So it goes back to actually what we were talking about earlier on, which is in the previous episode, which is about aligning activities to what the business is trying to achieve. So that kind of checklist, I think, is really valuable, because then you're going, right, if I'm going to spend 3 hours doing this, how do I try and avoid being sucked into the rabbit hole, and focus on it. So yeah, that kind of strategic business impact checklist along with that AI checklist, I think is a good combination. So if someone listening wants to move from that kind of curiosity about AI to actually putting into work in their employer branding, or elevate their employer, their AI, implementation, what's kind of the very first step they should be taking after this episode?
Yeah, Chris, we have so much. Every day I get 10 requests for this Cleo report. So because of course we want Cleo in the hands of as many employer branding and talent leaders as possible, we are offering for a very limited time, we're offering a free Cleo report. It's super deep. Like, it gets into very deep intelligence about the value proposition of working at your organization. It is being offered for free at getcleo.ai. And guaranteed, and this is what we hear from the clients who are using it today, it is going to elevate your conversation with your chief people officer as well as your talent leaders. We're offering it for free, like each report, and we only get a one-time report. Of course, the idea is that you could purchase it for $3,000 a report, but the initial one is free just so you can see how powerful it is.
Yeah, it's good. Look, it helps nudge in the right direction, doesn't it? So yeah, definitely make sure that link is somewhere near this conversation for sure. But look, really appreciate it. It's been a good chat.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, we'll see you on LinkedIn for sure. We'll make sure we're dropping this everywhere, and let's get classic thing of let's keep the conversation going.
Absolutely, Chris. Appreciate you as always.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye now.